All right, good morning, everybody. Hopefully everybody can hear us. We will wait a couple more minutes to let some more people join. All right, we will go ahead and get started this morning. So welcome everybody. We're really excited to talk today about robotics in the workplace. And so hopefully you can see my screen share. Start out with an introduction. So I'm Jessica Lyons, Director of HR at John Henry Foster, and I've got Dustin Rubitz with me, Manager of Robotic Distribution and Industrial Application. And so a couple of housekeeping items to start with. Everybody's going to be on mute, and you'll have the option to ask questions. We'll have a Q&A at the end of the webinar. And if you want to ask a question, you can type it into your question bar, and we'll be able to kind of scroll through them and again answer them at the end of the presentation. And for those of you who hang on to the end, you'll have the opportunity to sign up for a complimentary on-site evaluation. And we're going to be sending a follow-up email after the webinar too, so that you can sign up and get some of the tools that we shared during the presentation. So a little bit of an agenda here. What we're going to cover first, we'll talk about the labor shortage. And everybody kind of knows about this big labor shortage that we have going on right now, but our goal is really to arm you with the data to kind of back up the cost of introducing a robotic solution into your organization. And so we'll talk through some of the things and trends that we're seeing out in the market right now, and again, really build that business case. And then Dustin will be talking about the different robotic solutions and applications and kind of building that confidence in robotics as a solution for your business. So to start out, there's a lot of data out there right now on the state of the labor market. DEED, the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, puts a lot of information out. They have a lot of different broadcasts that they do on a weekly basis. But you can see the trend in unemployment, and this is all specific to manufacturing. There are a lot of jobs out there. There are a lot of jobs, and there aren't enough people to fill them. So about 2 weeks ago, the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce had an event, a manufacturer summit, and they really focused on the two big things that are affecting manufacturers right now. So first, they talked about supply chain issues, which again are affecting everybody. And then the second thing they talked about was the labor shortage. So they had a representative from the National Association for Manufacturers there to speak to the problem. And he really started off his presentation and just asked everybody a question. He said, "Where are all the people?" And it was kind of mind-boggling that this person who's an expert in his field and kind of like leading the nation on hiring and manufacturing is asking the question that we're all asking: where is everybody? All these people that left the labor market, where have they gone? What are they doing? And so he kind of gave some speculation and joked around a little bit of people invested in cryptocurrency. What are they doing? But it is the big question that's on everybody's minds right now. And you can see it's all over LinkedIn, it's all over the news. But in August, 4.3 million Americans quit their jobs. It was a record high of 2.9% of the workforce leaving. And there's articles out there about like the Great Resignation, and a lot of people aren't there to fill the jobs. So kind of specific to our market here in Minnesota, just in Hennepin County in the last 30 days, we saw 1,351 manufacturing jobs posted. And they're not getting filled, but that's just in the last 30 days, and 519 manufacturing jobs in Minneapolis alone. So just kind of speaking to what we're seeing out there in the market. And so this is again through Deed. Deed does a lot of analysis. These are the most in-demand jobs in Minnesota right now. So stockers and order fillers, these warehousing positions are in super high demand. It's very competitive. They're number 4 on the list of highest demand jobs, again, according to Deed, and that's only behind retail and healthcare. So obviously healthcare is a really hot job market right now, as is retail. You see the signs everywhere. But order fillers and stockers, and then behind them, material handlers and forklift operators are number 8. And we'll talk a little bit later on about some of the robotic applications that can help with some of these forklift operator jobs. But those are really high in demand right now, along with maintenance technicians. Those are number 16. Production workers are number 93. But all of these jobs have a 5-star demand, meaning that that's the highest level of demand. And this is out of 538 different occupations that they're analyzing throughout the state. So to stay competitive and to try and attract talent, manufacturing companies and warehousing organizations have had to do some things that are kind of outside the box, outside of the norm. And you're seeing these things pop up that traditionally haven't been done in manufacturing. So flexible hours is one. And I come from a manufacturing background where you have these really strict schedules. So you start at 6 in the morning, you get done at 2:30, you have shift handoff. And that's where you catch a lot of efficiencies when you're in some of these facilities like maybe food manufacturing where the margins are really thin. You have to make up inefficiencies, and you know, having a smooth handoff cuts down in machine downtime. And so there's a lot of reasons why historically manufacturing hasn't done these kind of flexible schedules. But you've got some really big manufacturers. One shoe manufacturer went to this flexible hour schedule where employees can sign up for 4-hour work blocks. And it's very new again, but looking back at the last year, there's a lot of trends like at-home learning, and people have had to stay at home to help their kids with school. So if you can come up with something like this 4-hour work block where somebody can maybe spend half of their day helping their kid with school, half of their day actually going to work, maybe we can recoup some of those people who otherwise wouldn't be able to join the workplace. Another thing that we've seen as a trend is on-site childcare. And again, this is for manufacturing facilities. There's outstate, like rural Minnesota, a really large food manufacturer put an on-site daycare with their meat processing facility. And again, you know, with school being remote or maybe limited availability in childcare centers, it's a way to retain employees or attract talent. But there's a cost associated with all of these things. So the cost of opening on-site childcare, I mean, first of all, you have to find the space, you have to hire the talent to watch the kids, and then the cost of administering the whole program. So there's an expense there. And so with all of these things that we'll kind of talk through, there's an expense that could be reduced in implementing a robotic solution. Tuition reimbursement programs, those are really big right now too. You see that a lot on LinkedIn. A lot of these big Fortune 500 companies offering, you know, full tuition for a 2-year program. So again, a big investment. Sign-on bonuses are really big right now, and our own HR team. So we've been doing the same things that everybody's been doing to try and attract talent. So we've been sponsoring jobs on Indeed. We've been going to job fairs. We've been working with the local technical colleges, been going out to high schools even, doing our employee referral programs. We've implemented sign-on bonuses as well for some of these hard-to-fill positions. But a couple months back, we were just really getting desperate and decided we'd go out and canvass the community. And so we just literally took out flyers and went to gas stations. We went to the library, went to the community center, and while we're out, we're seeing what everybody else is doing. I mean, putting up a posting at the gas station, they're also hiring. But driving around the town, you can see all of these signs that say we're hiring and advertising sign-on bonuses. And the biggest one that we saw is we actually went by a facility that was looking for drivers, truck drivers, and they were offering a $10,000 sign-on bonus, which is huge. And again, that kind of money could be invested in a robotic solution. Maybe not for drivers, but for a lot of different applications. Increased wages is another topic, and that's kind of a topic all on its own because wages are also very competitive right now. But some things that kind of get tacked on top of wages are increased shift bonuses. So in manufacturing, historically, you'll have shift differentials for second shift, third shift, a premium on top of your hourly wage. And you're seeing companies add to these. So one of the big distribution companies added an additional $2 an hour on top of their second shift bonus just to try and attract talent to those off shift hours. So again, it's really competitive, and there's a cost that's coming with all of this. So like I mentioned, increased wages, this is something that we're seeing across the board. And so right now, you're seeing wages of $15 or higher just across the private sector in general, and production is one of these critical sectors. And so just in July 2021, production jobs were averaging $16.37 an hour. And this is all information from DEED. So DEED reported out that from 2019 till 2021 through July of 2021, production jobs were up $2.20 an hour, which is 15.7% from 2019, which is huge, especially if your company is budgeting for like a 3 to 5% increase in wages year over year. The wages that we're seeing right now, just to stay competitive, really blow that out of the water. And DEED kind of said, forget about 2020. 2020 was an anomaly. So that's why they kind of pulled back to look from 2019 through current day. And then hourly wages for all private sector workers, not just production jobs. In August 2021 alone, they saw a 9-cent increase. And then from August of 2020, they saw a $1 an hour or a 3.2% increase. And then from August 2019, saw a $2.42 increase or 8%. And so it's a huge increase to cost for the business. And you're seeing a lot of trends just in going to Target. Like in my neighborhood, obviously there's a huge sign on the side of Target that says we're hiring, and it's advertising $15 an hour. And in the last week, they changed it, and now it's advertising $16 an hour. So it's really competitive out there right now because, all of these big retailers too are hiring, and they're putting their wages right on the building. So because people aren't able to fill their positions right now, obviously they're having to supplement those hours with overtime. And so this is, again, information from DEED, but we've seen an increase in hours in the private sector over the last couple of years as well. So compared to 1 and 2 years ago, they report through August to August, it was a 1.1% increase from 2020 and a 3.5% increase from 2019. And so kind of taking that data and looking at it a little bit further, already you kind of add in a buffer for overtime in manufacturing and warehousing applications. But if you add this additional 3.5%, if you have a person that's making $20 an hour, from 2019 through 2021, that's an additional $2,402 per year for one person. And it's an additional $755 from 2020 per person. So if you have a 200-person manufacturing floor, that's going to add up really quick. And from 2021, it's an additional $151,000 and almost $500,000 from 2019. So again, a lot of added costs just because there's not people out there. And then another point that DEED was making in their research with the current state in manufacturing and warehousing is that manufacturers saw a loss of productivity during the pandemic, and that's still going on. So they surveyed manufacturers throughout the state, and half of them indicated a drop in employee productivity. And they cited a lot of different things, but wearing masks, additional cleaning, Cleaning takes up a lot of time. If you're cleaning at the beginning of your shift, the end of your shift, having to spread out processes was another one. Social distancing and keeping people 6 feet apart and putting up partitions. In manufacturing, again, you are looking for efficiencies, and if you can have like your process figured out, and maybe you're in close proximity to hand off materials from one station to another, and you have to spread that apart, there's a loss right there. COVID illnesses themselves, so having people out of work for 10 to 14 days. And if you have other employees in that area who are a close contact, then you're going to have multiple people out for that quarantine period. So you're losing out on labor in that regard too. So we already talked a bit about, it's just hard to find people right now. So SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, cited some data on the time to fill. So how long is it taking once you open up a job posting to actually fill that position? And on average right now, and this is across all occupations, they're saying it's about 41 days. And so 41 days to fill a position, and then looking at time to start. So if you're pulling from a labor pool of people that are already employed, they might have to give a 2-week notice. So then you're looking at maybe even an additional 14 days beyond that. So that's a huge gap. And again, supplementing with people right now are trying to supplement with overtime. But if you could fill that with a robotic solution, you don't have to worry about that large gap in missing productivity. And then cost per hire itself. So usually a good rule of thumb is to average between $4,000 to $6,000 per position, depending on the skill level. But SHRM cites that, they're seeing an average of $4,129 per cost to hire. And the longer that your job is open, the higher that cost is going to be, because you're adding additional recruiting costs and you're losing out on productivity again. And then also to factor in with all of these costs, turnover. So manufacturing turnover in 2020 was astronomical, 44.3%, where historically in years past, it had been between 27.2 and 32.5%. And that's nationwide. So that's the Bureau of Labor Statistics reporting on that. But cost of turnover is huge, because once you turn somebody over, then you're starting this process all over again. So if you're looking at maybe a facility with 200 production employees, and you're citing that 44% turnover rate and the cost per hire, you're looking at $300,000 in a year just with turnover. And that's on the low end. That's a low estimate there. So all of this data kind of builds into, helping you build a business case toward why it would be beneficial to implement a robotic solution within your organization. Because right now, there's all of these different costs associated with hiring, and they're higher than they have been historically. And, in years past, maybe it was taboo. People said, well, all of these robotic solutions are going to replace people in the workplace and displace workers and displace jobs. And that's really not the case. Right now, you can't find people to fill the jobs. So we're having to look for alternative solutions. And that's really where robotics comes in. Also, when looking to future growth, even before the pandemic, you have baby boomers leaving the workforce, and you're already looking at what can we do to fill those gaps. So here, we're going to highlight our robotic calculator tool, and this is out on our website, and this will also be sent out after the presentation. And so let me just screen share here. I'll pull up. It makes some different assumptions based on some of the things that we talked about. So they assume, first of all, year one cost of a robot being $50,000, and that'll change based on what kind of robotic solution you implement, but these factors can all be changed in the calculator. And then they assume an average hourly labor rate of $20 an hour, and then a 3% merit increase year over year. And that field can also be changed in the calculator. And then assuming like payroll taxes and benefits and things like that make up 30% of somebody's salary, that's factored in. And then assuming approximately 10% overtime for employees added to the final employee cost. And then also assuming a 10% cost in service and parts for the robotic solution in future years. And then they also assume that the full-time employee is going to be 80% as efficient as the robot in year one, 85% as efficient in year two, and then 90% as efficient in year three. So you can see after you reset, calculate, it'll pull up all the numbers and it compares the cost of the robot versus the employee, and then the cost savings that you would recoup in the cost per hour and then the cost per unit. And you can see that that cost savings increases year over year by implementing a robotic solution. So not only are you saving out on some of those initial costs that it's taking to hire, and maybe some of those alternative solutions that you're having to implement to hire, but as time wears on, you're going to see additional cost savings from a robotic solution.
So I'm actually going to step in here. So this is Dustin speaking. Just wanting to kind of elaborate a little bit on this. So myself, actually having come from more of a manufacturing world / environment, when I was looking at some of this when we were setting all this up, I was actually pretty impressed and enamored by how this was all kind of coming together. And one other thing that just a note on something you commented on earlier. So RIA, so Robotic Industries Association, they've pretty much been tracking from the existence of robots on how it actually affects the manufacturing world. And when unemployment is down, robot sales are actually up. So they've proven through time that robots typically have a tendency to generate more jobs because you need throughput. You know, there's more added throughput. So again, you need more stocking people, shipping, receiving, all the above. So that's just one thing to add too. So, and again, right now we're not really in that position because we can't find the labor due to the shortage of it. But nonetheless, again, robots, they're awesome when it comes to being able to assist with the manufacturing process.
Well, that's a great segue then, because now we'll kind of switch gears, and instead of focusing so much on the labor side of things, we'll talk more about the different robotic solutions. So we have a quick video here.
So basically, kind of one thing that we were trying to show with all that is, you know, for the most part, a lot of this is kind of more evolved around the collaborative robot side of things, because what, you know, we alluded to earlier in this webinar was, you know, the productivity, you know, being down because of, again, more cleaning and, you know, the sicknesses and whatnot. So obviously, you know, robots don't get sick. You don't have to worry about the volatility as much when it comes to the cleaning aspect. And then with cobots, what's cool is, you know, you get to work side by side because of the safety side of things. So since you have, you know, force torque sensors that are built into the arm itself, you don't need to necessarily cage these off Granted, keep in mind the robot itself is collaborative, but the devices that you either may be attaching to it or the items you're picking up, if you're going to be swinging around a piece of sheet metal that's got a sharp corner at neck height, you probably don't want to have that uncaged. But nonetheless, the robot itself will still be able to stop. It's just you'd have to do your own risk assessment. And in the video, you also saw too a lot of the different applications that we see out there. So in all reality, no one application is the same. So typically in the past, what we've done is, we go out to the customers, we set up a meeting for an on-site visitation so we can walk through and just, even if it is just simply walking through your plant to see, because since this is our business and this is what we do, it's easy for us to walk by a certain application and say, this is a perfect spot to place a robot. And we always look for quick, easy wins. We don't ever go initially, especially if you've never done robotics, we don't want to start off with like your most complicated solution, even though that's typically your biggest pain point. So that's where most customers have a tendency to want to migrate to. But we like to start with something extremely simple, a simple pick and place or a simple assembly process, just to get a win and to show, the entire company like the success that a robot can bring with something so simple, and then migrate into the more complicated solutions. Because the more you play around with the robot and the more you get acclimated to it, the easier it is to kind of understand how it's going to work, and it's a better way to come up with a development plan on how you can attack those more difficult situations. So one thing that I'd say too is that what we've seen success a lot of is the ones that we primarily put on the video. So whether it's palletizing, which you saw in that video, there was actually, could you fast forward just a little bit some way to like where it does the automatic palletizing, right? Actually back there. Yeah. So this right here, just pause right there. So this is a canned solution that comes from TechMan Robots. So TechMan is the robot that we sell, and it comes with onboard vision. And what they've done here is they've actually placed, or they've developed their own software. So it's basically a palletizing wizard. So if your box size changes or you want a different pattern, it makes it really easy to do. So that way, if you don't have a well-educated, robot programmer, you're just relatively a novice at it. But when it comes to palletizing, it's typically relatively easy, especially if it's boxes. If it's bags, which we just ran into that situation, that's a little more difficult, but boxes are extremely easy to do. And then actually just go a little bit further forward. Right there. All right, perfect. So you can see that it's a 2 pallet stack that they have set up right now. So as you transition the pallet in and out, it's already got sensors to say, yes, I know the pallet's in position, or the other one's gone, or whatever the case may be. So it's got and-on lights that it triggers on there. So it's just a really neat, again, canned solution. And quite honestly, you can do this for $100,000 or $100,000 or less. And again, with somebody that's never had any experience, it comes with its own teach pen and its own wizard. It makes it really slick. Another thing too is we've done really simple assemblies, which again were showed in some of those videos. One other place that we've been seeing a lot of success too is actually press rooms. So anything like brake presses or stamping presses, especially if it's blanking dies. When it comes to compound or progressive dies, it gets a little more difficult just because of the speeds and feeds you typically run into, especially with prog dies. Just because a collaborative robot, due to its safety, you're limited a little bit when it comes to how quickly it can move, because it needs to be able to stop, as fast as possible. But if you're moving anything over 1 meter per second, you're going to be running into an issue with the safety. So that's why you'd have to go to a more traditional industrial robot. We've done a fair amount of machine tending recently too. One thing, a caveat that I'll add to that is, unless you have a robot controller already embedded on your post processor, we typically don't want to tie into your actual controller. So as you saw the robot opening and closing the door and pushing the buttons itself, we only tie into, typically there's a light that says, quill stop or program done. We are also sending a Q code out just to give us, an M30 stop, whatever it is. So we can do it. It's just if you don't have a robot controller, we probably won't tie into the actual controller itself. We do a lot of gluing and dispensing too, especially when it comes to like the window and door industry. We see that a lot over there, or especially in like ag, or like kind of the ATV market too, or anything recreational based. They use a lot of dispensing when it comes to silicones or like a foam dispensing or any kind of gluing too. So we've done a lot with that as well. And then recently kind of ran into a fair amount of injection molding companies. We know you can use like a Star Automation or a Whitman, overhead robot, just a, 3 axes or maybe add a fourth for a rotary actuator to dump it. But more and more companies that we've been running into that have, say for instance, smaller injection molding machines, it seems to make sense to have a robot there. So we have it inverted, just like you would see again with one of those larger systems, but we don't have to open and close the door of that because we're coming in through the top. And then on top of that, we don't really need a lot of reach. So it's been working pretty well for that in those situations. And deburring, deburring and polishing, so you saw that in the video too. We've actually kind of discovered, we went through a lot of issues in the beginning trying to figure out, even though we would add a force torque sensor to do the gluing or to do the deburring, sorry, we noticed that it didn't have enough compliance. So what we did is we actually added a compliance device on top of the force torque sensor because otherwise it was too rigid to where it would actually be giving feedback to the robot too accurately, that we needed it to be a little softer so it could follow a path, even though we knew that, say for instance, the flashing that was on there that we're deburring, it changed in thickness and in shape. So to mitigate that, we would use the force torque sensor with the compliance device, and we were highly successful, and we've been doing it multiple times since. And then another thing that's kind of cool too is the screw driving application that you saw in there. So we partner with a lot of different vendors. So we have a really deep ecosystem through the TechMan's side of things. Because as I'm sure a lot of you know, a lot of the collaborative robots that are out there are partnering with these other companies that have the ability to communicate directly with the robot. So you don't have to have that complicated interface between the robot and a PLC and trying to figure out how to get them to talk back and forth. So we partner with those vendors out inside that ecosystem, so it's plug and play. And when it comes to probably smaller screws, it works really well. The larger screws, it's still a little on the difficult side. Where then I'd probably migrate, a company into more of an industrial style robot because they have the ability to handle that a little more effectively, especially if you're in a larger screw environment, you're going to be dealing with higher torques. And then food too. So when it comes to, we see a lot of food. I mean, when it comes to the primary side, we're probably not going to be using the collaborative robot because it's not full washdown. However, there are attachments you can add on to this. So we work with multiple companies that have jackets that you can put around them. So they aren't 100% going to be probably going to pass from a primary perspective on washdown, but you can even energize them with air to keep particulate out from the inside. They actually make one that's hypoallergenic now that you can actually put around there because it's a little tighter onto the robot, so you don't have crevices that particulate can stay into. And then, but on the secondary side, we see a lot of it with the packaging side of things. So it's already packaged, so it's easy to move around, easy to box, easy to palletize. So that's been another big success for us too. Another thing too, earlier in this presentation, it was stated that a lot of companies are seeing lack thereof, stockers or order takers. Another thing that we're able to do is communicate with your ERP system. So we can go through your enterprise resource planning to be able to say, all right, we received this in, or we're sending this out through a palletizing perspective. So we can talk back and forth, which kind of has a tendency to, I don't want to say eliminate, but reduce the amount of effort you need from a human being to actually go through that process. And then, I mean, overall, one other thing that we're seeing too, and just to kind of go on this with the labor shortage side of things, is we see it all over the place. Because even with our vendors, I mean, I'm sure that a lot of you are running into issues when it comes to lead times and whatnot, because you call these companies and it's like we can't find people. So I mean, even with our vendors ourselves, we've been asking them if they want to automate. So we're like trying to help out the people that are helping us. So it's been an interesting world. And then, so another thing that we're going to show here really quick. So this is I'll actually just let the video play and then I'll talk about it. When it's So before we go on to talking about what you just saw there, that's an auto-guided vehicle fork truck, forklift. One thing I forgot to mention when it came to the cobot stuff, out of all those applications that we've done historically, we've been averaging for a fully integrated complete system between about $60,000 to $70,000 for most of those applications that we just discussed. So if you take that number and apply that to that ROI calculator that we were able to show, I mean, the numbers, and on average for the companies we've been talking to, they've been shooting close to 195 to 205 days for their ROI, based on once they have it fully implemented to see how this thing works. So you just go back to the image on the, just back there. Put a comment further back, right there. Yeah. Thank you. So we recently partnered with Bila. So this is the company that we're currently using for our AGV forklifts. We actually have a demo right now at our facility. We're still working out a few kinks with it from when it came in from a shipping incident, but we got it pretty much running now. So nonetheless, so you can actually see that this is a huge issue when it comes to finding people that can actually drive forklifts, as we discussed earlier. And with this, it's pretty awesome technology because they got multiple sensors on here. So it's running, two area scanners, it's running LiDAR, it's running ultrasonic sensors all around. I mean, it's extremely safe. Typically, you can lift up to if you keep a low load, it's 4,000 pounds, but you're typically looking at 2,500 pounds. And as you can see here, that red device, that's a pallet dispenser. So we actually just utilized one of these on the last application that we had. So it was a food application to where, again, we were stacking bags of product on top of it. But we wanted to shoot out to the robot, and then when it was done, we could use an AGV to release it out of the system. So that way we didn't have to actually have a fork truck driver come over because they were able to handle the load and go put it into a staging area. But it's just really cool technology, and we're seeing this more and more in a lot of companies that, because we keep hearing it, that they need to get more people to be able to drive forklifts, where this can somewhat mitigate it because, again, we have an ROI calculator for Bila as well, and we can probably talk to marketing to put that on our website somehow. But they run right around about 150,000. But then when you figure out the cost of the fork truck itself, the cost of an operator, and the risk and everything else involved, there again, these show that they pay themselves off in a very short time, about a year to a year and a half, depending on the facility. It's got an auto docking, auto charging station. And you can do an auto battery swap station too. So that way, if you wanted to use one fork truck with two batteries and just leave one battery charging, we can make that happen. or a lot of companies will just buy 2 or 3, so that way one will be charging for, say, for instance, 2 to 4 hours as the other 2 are off doing their thing, and then they just keep, changing in and out from driving up to the auto dock so they can get charged. I mean, overall, I think that we've probably thrown a lot at you here in a very short amount of time. I'm hoping it was informative, but just kind of maybe open it up for some questions and whatnot if anyone's got anything.
Yeah, any questions you can send through. There's a question chat box. And we do have an email that we'll be sending out after the fact. So if you're not interested in sharing a question during the webinar, you can reach out to us and ask a question individually. And we'll be able to talk through maybe your specific situation or your specific application. So one thing that we wanted to mention too is that I mentioned an email coming out at the end of the recording. After the webinar, everybody will get a copy of the webinar itself. And included with that will be a form, and you can actually request an on-site visit. So one of our robotic experts, potentially Dustin himself, can come out to your facility and, kind of like he mentioned, look at your process to determine where would be a good place to implement your first robotic solution. And so that too, if you look at our calculator again, out on the website, you can get a quote and it will kind of lead you to a page where you can type in some information and somebody will reach out to you on a one-on-one basis. So I guess we'll give everybody 18 minutes of their life back, but thank you for joining us. Oh, we have a question. All right, so I think this one would probably be geared more toward you. To take a 5-ounce package off a conveyor and place it in a case, what speed can it go?
So typically a lot of that comes down to the overall reach of how far you need to move that. In general, I would say that if you stay in collaborative mode, we usually look at a max of 10 picks a minute. Most likely though, in many cases, it's closer to 6 picks a minute, again, depending on how far we actually need to move the robot. But if you keep it relatively close, you can probably hit about 10 picks a minute in collaborative mode. They do have the ability to go outside of collaborative mode, but most likely you wouldn't want to do that because you're looking at going into collaborative for the safety side of things.
I think next question for you too then would be, do you have your own techs?
We do. So another thing with that is, as we're having this presentation here, one challenge we're having is getting more techs. So our capacity right now is, fairly overloaded. Well, let's be honest, but we're in the process of hiring as many more as we possibly can.
And then this next one's for you too. Are you able to do custom autonomous vehicle applications outside of fork trucks?
Right now, so we have been talking with a couple of companies in regards to that. We don't have a line, so we're looking at both Mir and Auto. Auto's probably been the one we've been looking at the most because they have a higher payload. But as of right now, we don't actually distribute one, but it doesn't mean that we can't do a system with one if you had, say, for instance, a company that you would prefer to work with on the AGV side.
And then another question, would your techs be local, so Minnesota based?
Yeah, so all of them come based out of Eagan. That's where everyone's located, at least on the robotic side, even though one thing we've been looking at doing is, since we have so many techs out on the road, I think we have 21 guys that are out on the road, if I'm not mistaken. We've been looking at training them to be able to do, because we have satellite offices, so we have 4 total offices. So we want to get guys trained in, like, say, for instance, our Fargo location or in our Cedar Rapids location. So that's one thing that we've been looking at as well.
Yeah, because those techs right now are really doing the service and installation of our compressor
Right.
business. Yeah, and
Yep.
so a lot of
So
applicable skills that could be.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we're looking at doing cross-pollination there since they're already working with PLCs anyways. Because on our other side of the business with compressors, they come in with an embedded PLC if they're the larger style.
Next question, again for Dustin. Are the TechMan robots listed by a nationally recognized testing lab like UL, TUV, etc.?
Right now, it's a CE based. They claim in 2022 they will have roll out with the UL listing. They know that when it comes to the state side, that's something they've been really pushing. So we will be. They said that in 2022 we will have the UL listing, but right now it's just CE.
Lots of good questions. We'll do one last call for questions real quick here. All right, well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining. We hope you've been able to learn a little bit more about robots in the workplace. And so I mentioned before, you're going to receive an email following the presentation with some additional information on how to contact us, the presentation, the calculator tool. But if you do have any other questions, you can also email solutions@jhfoster.com, and we'll be sure to get back to you. So thanks again, and have a great day.
Thank you.